Hello, ladies and gentlemen. On the occasion of World Telecom Day, I am pleased to welcome you all for a panel discussion on the changing face of the Indian telecom sector. India is on the cusp of moving to next generation technology 5G. The pandemic has created a need for the smooth digital connectivity, be it education, health, or any other sector. The data consumption by mobile users in India has hit the roof, and with the 5G launch, it is expected to transform India into a whole digital economy. The panel discussion will talk about the momentous journey of India's mobile revolution from 2G to 5G, the years gone by, and the new developments which will change the whole ecosystem of the telecom sector. We have an eminent set of speakers today. Let me now introduce you to our panelists. Mr. P. Balaji, Chief Corporate and Regulatory Affairs Officer, Vodafone Idea; Rahul Watts, Chief Regulatory Officer at HL; Dr. S.P. Kochhar, Director General at COI, and Mr. Tia Dua, Director General at SAIFA. Welcome you all. Let me start first with telecom service providers who have risen to the occasion and became the backbone during the COVID times. Mr. Balaji, if I may start with you, the telecom industry has come far from the 2G era, but the last 2 years have been quite turbulent. Let's start with and listen to you on how telecom sector has ensured seamless connectivity during such times. What has been the challenges and the learning so far? Mr.
Thank you
Balaji.
thank you so much, Mansi, for inviting me to be part of this very esteemed panel and on your channel. Thank you very much. May I just say that your question is very pertinent. The last 2 years were very difficult for the world at large, and India has shown the way that we have been able to not just survive but also thrive. And as operators, all the operators and the ecosystem players, including tower players, have really done their bit to keep India connected. So whether it was movement of traffic from office to home overnight, whether it was due to lockdown, a lot of traffic that got pumped into our networks, our brave network warriors have actually put their lives at risk and made sure they were, enhancing the capacity of our networks. Of all the operators were doing that in order to make sure that India remained connected, which was so critical for individuals, for society as a whole, and also for the business and enterprises to continue to, operate in a very seamless manner. I guess the learning is that when you have robust players, when you have a whole processes in place that have been tried and tested, then it is possible to even handle crisis situations in a very meaningful manner, as long as the leadership is very focused, and it is also working closely with ecosystem players and the government, whether it's state government, central government, or our equipment providers, or our partners, and so on. I think that's one big learning that comes to mind, as well as it is possible to be safe and still get the work done. I think those two are the important learnings that I would say we took away from that challenging time. It also, on the other hand, provided the opportunity where India digitalized overnight, whether in the area of governance, whether in the area of the startup ecosystem, whether it is people who adopted digital in a very big way, from video conferencing to connect to people to work from home and everything else. It has really provided a stupendous growth opportunity, and it has therefore allowed the telecom sector to also then basically take that to the next level. And we feel that we have done our bit in terms of providing seamless connectivity and great services for enterprises and consumers. And more importantly, it has allowed us as operators to also start to think about gigabit society. How do we make sure that we are ready for the next paradigm shift, which will happen when 5G comes in later in this year? With that, I'll hand it back to you, Mansi.
Right. I'm sure everyone would agree to that. Mr. Watts, if you can share your insights as well.
Thank you, Mansi, and thank you, ETTelecom, for this invite. I think we have had a very prolific last 2 years with a lot of stress in the society, in systems, and I think, but one thing which held us all along was, of course, the digital infrastructure, which has really, shaped up, not across only in India, but in fact all across the world. And there's a renewed understanding of the hard work put in by telcos over the last 2 years as to how they have been able to sustain the society, education, health over the last two periods. I think the benefits of the digital ecosystem are in part due to the massive investments which have gone into rolling out these networks. And of course, also due to the progressive policies of both the Department of Telecom and the regulator TRAI. I think on the telco side, if I have to share the perspective about this period, I think when we started out, we saw such a massive jump in data, nearly 30% more data consumption in lockdown. People were watching Netflix, Amazon, Hotstar, and suddenly the data usage was really, shooting up. And so there was a lot of stress which was happening because of that. Also, there was a huge migrant population which was going in from urban centers to the rural centers. And so this, gave a lot of challenges to us. And, we took a lot of steps as Airtel. For example, we added up soft capacities, took a lot of temporary licenses, augmented our core capacities. In fact, more than 1.5 lakh sites, we had to do soft optimization, right? And I talked, of course, about the SD, conversion to SD conversion, which had to be done. So I think so these were the challenges which came out, and we really were able to, our network teams were able to really do these changes. And while people were sitting at home, these guys were actually on the street, actually trying to help out, and doing these changes. The second big point, I think, during that time, what holds you is the amount of investments you have been making. And I think, last year we committed around more than 18,000 crores on spectrum money. Our capex spends have remained constant at around 20,000 crores now for several last of the years. And these things hold you in good stead, when you are actually going up, for such period. From the customer angle, I think it's very important to understand again that we passed on benefits of more than 270 crores, to around 55 million subscribers in that period. The low income, particularly subscribers who are there, we had benefits given of talk time to more than 80 million people. Although a small recharge of 10 rupees, but it's a huge amount of money. So there were a lot of efforts being done, and not only by us, by everybody else in the ecosystem who are trying to see that the customers are able to sustain and actually use the network over a period of time. Balaji alluded to it. I think the biggest gain of this period has been the digitalization of the society, right? And when we started out, the daily recharges happening electronically used to be hardly 35%. At the time of COVID, this jumped to more than 65%. And even now, when the COVID is back to some normal levels, we are still seeing a digital recharge happening of around 55 to 60%. So I think society has had a paradigm shift, in terms of, what has changed over this period of time. So I think we are at the right cusp for the next phase of, telecom. And this period the resiliency of this period has really helped us to understand and to serve the, society better. So telecom as the digital oxygen, I think is what has been proven in this time. And I think that's what we should all learn and, look forward to in next few years. Thank you.
Right, right. That is very interesting. Very, very great insights there. So now let's go across to Mr. Kocher. So if you can talk about the journey of the telecom industry since the sector was opened up to the private players, what has been the major ups and downs? And again, if you could talk about some of the learnings of that period.
Thank you, Mansi. Thank you so much. Firstly, let me compliment my colleagues who have just spoken. They know how to put across a point very succinctly, and they've done it this time also. So I not only agree with them, and I'll try to answer the question that you posed to me. It's been a journey of almost 26, 27 years when the decision was taken to induct private players into the telecom industry. And if you look back over these 25 years from 36,000 feet, you will see that the entire Indian telecom industry has grown because of the private players, right? They started off at that point of time, there were no precedents to follow. They invested, they took a risk, and they started connecting the country like never before. And we could see the difference in my time itself. We used to queue up for many hours together to get a STD call, and now you see STD call, there's nothing known as STD call, everything. In the initial period, yes, there were multiple number of players because it was seen as a gold rush. and therefore multiple players came in, and slowly over the next few years, they started falling off because they found that this is not so much of a golden period as they were imagining, and therefore only the serious players remain. And now we have consolidated to 3 players, which is the optimum, and which is a mature industry. The telecom has matured and it has come of age. At this point of time, one of the most mature industries in the country is telecom. The policies have also matured. They have gone from the national telecom policy to the national digital policy, which is also a major shift. During this period of 25 years, somewhere in between, the government felt, and visionary people at that time at the helm of affairs felt, that the private industry has to be handheld for some time, and that actually was the starting point of TRAI formation. And since then, the regulator has been there. The charter was to help the private industry flourish. That another turning point came when the spectrum was monetized by the government, and that time the look at the telecom industry started changing, and the government started getting a huge amount of revenues from that, and the telecom players started going down in revenue collection because of the charges they had to pay for spectrum. So that is a situation which hasn't yet stabilized, and that requires to be stabilized, especially when we are going into 5G. As far as the last 2 or 3 years is concerned, I think we were already moving into an era where digital networks were becoming essential, but COVID only catalyzed it. What would have otherwise happened in 5 to 6 years happened over 1 year. And the reason was that the population started going from physical highways, congested physical highways, to not so congested digital highways. And it is to the credit of the telecom industry and the operators that they kept that congestion extremely low. And never during this period of COVID was there a complaint for a long time that the networks are congested and we can't get through. So they put in a huge amount of unseen effort to get this. And this has not gone unseen. After COVID, telecom has now emerged as an essential service like water and electricity, and the government has started recognizing. And you also see a shift in the government way of behavior with the private industry. It is more cooperative behavior now than it was before. And this can easily be seen in the telecom reforms which have come about. This is an era where the government as well as the industry are both committed to see that the telecom services go to the nook and corner of this country, go to every individual in this country, and go in a manner that it benefits him or her. A thing which normally people are not talking about is in the COVID era, because we became digitized and so much, we depended so much on telephony services. The employment in some areas has actually increased. Yes, overall employment would have gone down, but in telecom sphere, in some areas, employment would have increased. May not be in the direct area, maybe indirect area, but it has increased. It has given a livelihood to people. Going forward, I see that telecom is something which is a foundation for the rest of the country. And the GDP of the country will depend to a very large extent on the robust networks that we can roll out. And how the government and industry cooperate with each other to make this an industry which is not burdened with quarter-on-quarter earnings, but definitely goes forward with one aim, and that is making the country reach the zenith of ICT services and also give benefit to our population. Mansi.
Right. That was quite informative. I'm sure everyone would agree. We all worked during last 2 years from home. Every office was working from home. So it's like all thanks to the telecom players that we could, keep up and running. So let's go across to Mr. Dua. Mr. Dua, if you can share insights on the same.
Thank you very much. I think this is a very good question, and the panel that you have, I think the panel who have been in this journey, along with us for a very long time. The journey started in 1991 when the slogan like liberalization, privatization, and globalization. And the first thing what happened was the manufacturing sector was open to the private sector, which opened the sector for manufacturing in the India itself. By 19th, the sector had already significant player who participated in this industry, like decentralization, disinvestment drive, which was conducted by the government and was instrumental in allowing private entities to them. Now, then what happened? The 1994, I think the first cellular system was introduced and the 4 metros came into the field, Delhi, Calcutta, Bombay metros. And by then what has happened was then this is a case, typical case where the operator had come into the play and the regulator was not there. In 1997, the regulator was put in place. So therefore, we have seen from that time then again, the TD said that the tribunal to sort out any of the dispute between the operators and the government was also there, and also some of the time between the consumer was there. So then the TD set was also here. We have seen major policy reforms which have been coming from time to time. First one, but in 1992, first NTP 1992 in 1990, so 1992 came, followed by another NTP which was in 2012, then followed by another NTP that is 2018. Through all these initiatives of the government, I think the reforms continue to do that, but still the sector was reeling under the financial health. Then comes the case of, initially the IP1 was under licensing. The IP1 reform came into the use, which was again brought in as a registration of the IP1. Post that, it was also said that instead of a licensing, the IP registration came, and finding that it was again further reformed that the sharing of the infrastructure, which made a big dent into the whole infrastructure. It happened in 2010 when the infrastructure sharing was done. Earlier, it used to be on the barter system. Then the infrastructure sharing was allowed. With the result today, I think India has come out with a history which is called the sharing of the infrastructure, which is globally being emulated. Today, we have 7 lakh towers and 23 lakh PD sitting, which cannot be compared with any, even in case of China, you have the other way around, there are around 6 lakh towers which are shared, but 23 lakhs, total 23 lakh towers. This is how the journey from 1991 to this one came. Further reforms continued to come. Then NDCP came, NTP 2012 came, and then various other things. And as we move forward into the other question, we will touch base on that. Thank you so much.
Right. Great insights there. So let's go back to the operators now. Mr. Rahul, if I may ask you, India is one of the most affordable mobile markets, but the tariffs are very low. But the data growth we have seen has hit the roof. So let's talk about some technological revolutions and policy interventions that has led to such high growth in the sector.
Thank you, Mansi, for this question. To start, of course, we are aware today that our users are generating an average of around 19 GB per month, right? And if I look at the quarter ending December 21, we were generating around 11.3 terabits of data on our network. Now, to sustain that much amount of data, naturally you require huge amount of investments. But unfortunately, the problem we have is that our ARPU levels are very dismal. We are hardly at around $2.2 ARPU. Even if you compare countries like Philippines, Indonesia, Vietnam, Iran, most of them are between $2.5 to $7.5 ARPU. right? In fact, the world average is around $8. So that is, one big challenge. The other big aspect is that if you look at the recent GSMA report, it actually mentioned that in India we have the highest capex to sales ratio in Asia Pacific, which is as high of 35%. And this is of course driven by a combination of amount of 4G network coverage which has been done and the capacities which have been created. So with 5G now around the corner, these capex and investments are naturally going to rise as we go ahead. And of course, we are aware of the technological revolution which has happened, now that we have 4G, we've got massive rollouts happening, the smartphones, which the subscribers are carrying today, and the multiple applications which are now possible to be able to use these things. Of course, the government's agenda is also clear. We have the massive digital inclusion drive which is happening, huge amount of data being used, even for UPI transactions, for example. It's one of the world's highest, number of transactions which are happening through our UPI. So, and we are heading towards the industrialization, the digitization of our business sectors in future. I think to keep up pace with these, naturally you require policies and regulations, regulations which actually help you not only to serve the customers better, but also to reduce costs, going ahead, and to facilitate the network deployments, and most importantly, make it less risky for the investments to continue to pour in. I think the government is very conscious, of this entire issue, and the recent seminal reforms by the government last year actually was clearly indicating, indicative of, what the government really feels about this sector. And we really hope that this now continues in Reform 2.0. There are several issues, particularly regarding adequate backhaul spectrum, the regulatory levies which continue to remain high, and also further simplifications on our AGR regime, on the excess GST credit, which require some sort of solution. And even, in fact, I'll mention about the settlement of some of the litigation which has been pending for too long. I think on the policy front, what you really have to see is that what has really helped this revolution, honestly, is the abundant availability of spectrum. So we started from a point where we used to be a spectrum-starved country, and now we have got abundance of spectrum, country. And then, of course, we had these guidelines which came up last decade about trading, sharing of spectrum. And we now hear even leasing, will be up under consideration in future. So that's another good reform which really helped us to stabilize. Of course, now with the spectrum becoming a regular feature, this really helps out to, chart your territories. I would also mention about the huge amount of ease of doing business initiatives taken by the government last year, particularly on the KYC front, how we acquire the customers, on the digital modes, on using Aadhaar as option for acquiring subscribers, and these all small things actually add up to the entire environment and ecosystem of how you can really do better in terms of what rolling out you're doing. I think one big area which has been done and still requires more to be done, and I'm sure Mr. Dua would also agree with me, is on the right of way policy. So we had the 2016 Gazette which came out, which really set out the way for us. And we've also seen some recent orders coming on the 5G small cells. But I'm saying there's a lot needs to be done on that. And we are sure as we go ahead towards 5G, we are going to see more and more of bold reforms coming from the government and from all stakeholders.
Right. Great. Mr. Balaji, if you can share your thoughts as well on this.
Thank you. So I think 3 or 4 things which are critical to keep in mind. First is that we are still only half done in terms of broadband connectivity. We have about 700 million broadband connectivity and internet users. There's still 500 million more to be done. And that means even more investment is required in taking 4G even further, number one. And number two, as we start to go into the 5G era in the coming quarters and years to come, even more needs to be done in terms of investment. The number of sites that are required, the amount of street furniture that would require to be used for densification of networks in urban India in order to cater for 5G small cells is significantly higher. Therefore, that's one dimension of it. Second, in the context of the very, very low ARPUs and the stressed financial sector, something needs to be done in order to make sure that the cost of doing business comes down for the operators. The multiplier effect of 5G in terms of more GDP growth, more startups coming in, driving innovation, other sectors getting more efficient, and it having a multiplier effect on the economy. We'll talk a little bit later, I'm sure. But I think that is where the big benefit for the nation and for the government revenues will be, and for industries other than telecom will be. But for telecom, it's yet another cycle of investment that needs to come in, and therefore, the more cash flow is there with them, the better it is. So that's the second point. That's the another point that is to be kept in mind. The other aspect is that as you start to add more and more devices, and as you start to add more and more applications, IoT and so on, again, the need to be more ubiquitous with not just 4G networks, but 5G networks in times to come will be very high. The beauty is today we are at the point of having adequate spectrum for 4 players, because we have reached a situation where we have 4 operators, 3 private and 1 government owned. Therefore, it is important that there is adequate spectrum, which is raw material for telecom providers, for all the 4 operators. That becomes very critical. Thereafter, the burden on the industry, the less it is from a spectrum pricing point of view, the easier it is from a payment scheduling point of view, and the adequacy I spoke about earlier, will ensure that all the money then goes into putting into the networks, which, as I told you, with densification required to be significantly higher. In fact, the NDCP itself, the Progressive Policy of the Government of India, talks about the need for about $100 billion worth of investment to come in. That's a lot. And on a small revenue base that we have, it's not going to happen, because world over 5G has not increased revenues. So if revenue is not going up, then you've got to manage in the current situation. Then it needs to be, conservation of cash and everything going into network, which becomes super critical. Government is very aligned in terms of knowing what they want, very decisive government, very focused in what they want to accomplish for the larger national good and citizens. And therefore, we are quite hopeful that they will continue to, do more and more reforms to help the situation get better. Clearly, one request that has been from the industry side is a rapid growth. They said they will reduce the taxes and levies in the sector. Therefore, it would be great if the license fees is reduced. There's already 50,000-60,000 crores of kitty in the USO. Therefore, there is a case for the license fees being brought down significantly for mobile services in order to ensure that the network rollout is faster and the nation can get the benefit of multiplier effect of 5G.
Right. I'm sure with the department planning telecom reforms 2.0, many of your issues will be resolved there. So
Yes.
let's go to Mr. Kocher. Sir, you talked about the gold rush in the telecom sector. At one point of time, we had 12 players. Every foreign firm was eyeing the Indian market, but due to various reasons and controversies, the sector has now reduced to just 3 plus 1. So, do you think this is a viable structure? Will it survive, or there should be more players in the industry to increase the competition?
So, Mansi, let me correct you. It has the number of players has not reduced; they're stabilized.
Yeah,
Right. So and then
consolidation, if I may
yes.
use the right word. Okay.
Yeah. So the stabilization means that they have come to an optimum level where they can provide the services to the best quality and yet be cost effective. Right now, do we require another player to come in? It's a democracy. Any player can come in. Nobody will stop them. The question is, do they have adequate amount of business here? I think 3 players is optimum. We can't go below 3 players. We should not go beyond 3 players as of now. That's my opinion. And we must nurture their growth. And we must see that what they're providing is cost effective, and they also make a reasonable profit in doing that. After all, they're a private agency, and the government must realize that input output costs have to be matched. Right now, India is a price sensitive market. the tariff part is sensitive both to government as well as to the operators. If you see, people don't tinker with tariff too much. If the input cost can be reduced, that is good enough. And that is what we've been harping on with the government, that please reduce the input tax, improve liquidity. And going forward in the 5G era, it will be even more important because the use cases are not so obvious. And it will take time and a huge capital investment for the networks to roll out and be ready for the use cases as and when they come. World over, like Balaji said, the prediction that enterprise business will suddenly start giving revenues for 5G networks has not been proven right. The growth is very little, and that is because the use cases haven't emerged at the speed at which those countries anticipated. In India, it's going to be worse because India Industry 4.0 is just about getting introduced, and the maximum amount of enterprise that will consume 5G services is going to be Industry 4.0. And therefore, there'll be a larger period of waiting before our ARPUs increase to such an extent that we start becoming viable. And this is something that the government must realize. They are realizing. And therefore, the change in policies are happening slowly, but they're happening. And we are in parlance with the government. Obviously, when you talk to them, either we give in on some points, and some points they give in. But the point is that we have to be more vigorous. And we have to see that we don't miss the woods for the trees. Incremental revenue is a term Balaji mentioned. It is important to understand that there was no incremental revenue from telcos till 4G. Whatever revenue was coming to the government was coming only at one go, and that is by auction. And in 5G era, that's not going to be true. 5G era, the revenue that they can collect from telcos, even at old rates, is going to be hardly anything compared to what the industry can provide them if they get a robust network to grow on. Not only telecom industry, but 360 degrees industry, everything will get, they'll get benefited by 5G because of automation, because of various other things. And there will be challenges. So telcos will have to increase their investment from what they've been doing in 4G. Unforeseen expenditure is going to come on security. So these are the things that have to be factored in. We have to sit down, we have to discuss, and reforms have to come. They are coming, but they have to look at all aspects, and the revenue is something that they have to look up to, and not only look at other countries, but see India as an exclusive market, which is price sensitive and where the social demeanor is very important. It may not be so in the US, but in India, giving services to the poorest is important for both the industry as well as the government. Industry has been playing its part, and they have been maintaining whatever services they could give at the cost of not earning any revenue at all. But the government has also to step in and see that the prices are adequate, the costing is adequate for the telcos to make at least some sort of profit. Mansi?
Right. Right. Great, sir. Great, sir. We'll come back to this 5G revenues part a bit later. Mr. Dua, if you can share your views on the current structure we have in the telecom sector, do you think that's viable?
I think it's a good question, but we have my colleague Rahul, Balaji, and Kocher. I think they're the best guys to answer this question. But anyway, having been in this sector for over more than 30 years and has been a part of this liberalization 1994, I think when we had seen when the 11 to 12 operators were there, all that what is required is what you need when you want the ecosystem to continue to cater for so many players. A resource like spectrum, then creation of the infrastructure and the connectivity, which when we had 12 operators, it was becoming a little difficult. Then the consolidation process started. That consolidation process started, and virtually, I think, if you look at the my informal reading, what I know about is that globally, I think 3 to 4 player is a good one, which also takes care of the market situation as well as the competition part of it. There is market access, which is not there. There is no market. So therefore, it looks market is taken care of, but 3 to 4, at best 4 or 5 operators are there. Then the consolidation again was imperative when this now let me talk of the consolidation in case of the infrastructure, right, which has happened very recently. We had earlier ATC, Indus, Bharti Infra, ASN, Tower Vision, and many more were there. And slowly the consolidation happened. About 2 years back, Indus and Airtel have merged into a big entity. Today they have over 185,000 towers, and globally they are the number one company in this. So that is how the whole process of consolidation and consolidation has become the need of the day. It helps also the inflow of the investment into this. Then the policy, if you look at the policies also are slowly being tweaked to ensure that the sector remains financially healthy. Thank you so much.
So moving on, let's talk about 5G. There's so much momentum on the 5G. Every player is gung-ho about it. So this question is to all three of you. How do you see the landscape of the telecom industry changing once the 5G is launched? You talked about 5G not generating enough revenues in the global market. So how do you see that panning out in India? If you can share some insights on that, Mr. Watts, if you can start.
Thank you, Mansi. It's very interesting that a huge amount of commitments are to be made on spectrum and for the rollouts to happen. And Balaji will allude to this while we were in Barcelona and General Kocha earlier this year. We were trying to check how the rollouts have been across the world. And interestingly, very few operators are actually making any substantial moves. Even an operator like Verizon, who has been now some years into this business in 5G, is not able to show a substantial amount of revenue upswing. In fact, worldwide, if you take an average, you will not see more than 2 to 3% jump. The only deviations might come in maybe Korea, where gaming is a predominant form of revenue usage, or maybe China, where the amount of rollouts has been quite high. But coming back, I think what is going to happen with 5G is that you're going to see massive amount of speed being given to the customer who can enjoy a higher amount of speed. This will lead to new opportunities, specifically on AR, VR, gaming, maybe in Stadia presence, etc. are the use cases which are there. I think Korea is a good example of showing that sort of inclination. But as I said, the revenue which is coming out of this is hardly 2 to 3%. So there is going to be a pressure, due to the cost of spectrum and the investments which are being put in for that. Also, the experience is suggesting that the customers are not willing to pay a huge amount of premium for this sort of, this sort of high speed which is going to be available to them. And I think that is going to be a big challenge, going ahead. So the other big area, of course, for telcos is going to be the enterprise segment, which will open up new opportunities. And as we head towards connected machines, devices, IoT devices, and industrial automation, I think that is going to be a bigger area of revenue upswing, in years to come. The other big opportunity, of course, is the private dedicated networks that the telcos can and will build in future. And there's a huge opportunity for telcos here to address industrial connectivity needs and come out with more digitized versions of connectivity for specific needs of the enterprises, and that's going to be one big area of being able to do that. I think the advantage here is that the telcos can really use their assets like spectrum in the most efficient manner. We can do network slicing, we can do even in fact leasing of spectrum for the benefit and the scale of the enterprises which are there. I think our skills and experience in helping designing and building these networks is going to be really put to use while creating these networks. But while these opportunities are on the horizon, I think the challenges are also there, which we should acknowledge while going ahead. The level of fiberization in the country still remains very poor. And so we would require a massive amount of infusion of backhaul for us. Even after the backhaul is there, we will still require fiber. And so I think we still require a lot of work to happen on the ROW front. We require more progressive policies on aerial fiber, etc. to come. I think the other big area challenge I see in 5G still is the global supply chain pressure, right? We are still coming out of the COVID, but with China going into lockdown again, there is going to be a sustained pressure, of devices and equipment going ahead, chipsets going ahead. And I think that is going to be one big challenge, as we rapidly start, rolling out newer technologies. Another big area of focus is going to be the security. There is an increasing amount of, awareness and consciousness of the strength you require in your networks and the robustness you require to be able to create, networks of this size. And with the increasing, integration of digital economies into telecom networks, I think that's one big area, I think, which we'll have to see. Lastly, I also want to mention about, with increasing digitization, about data protection, right? And the needs for data localization. As we get more and more data, it will be incumbent upon us to be able to monetize, what we can come out of it. What sort of usage can be done in terms of aggregated data, and what are the, the norms which are going to be in place. And I think some of this is already going to be put up for discussion in next few months. And that's another going to be a big area for us to consider in 5G. Yeah.
Right. Great. That's like lot of information in one answer. Mr. Balaji, if you can share your views as well.
Yeah, so I think Rahul has given a good set of suggestions and given perspectives. Maybe just to add a few points. Number one, if I look out 10 years from now, clearly there are many opportunities that will develop because the ecosystem will start to come at scale at prices that are truly affordable. So if today devices are going to come more expensive with 5G chips compared to 4G, then unfortunately it means adoption will be slower than it would be, say, a few years down the line. When you look at 10 years out, do I see immersive gaming experience? The answer is yes. Do I see potentially the so-called metaverse kind of scenario developing in a very mainstream manner? Chances are yes. Do we see EdTech, Agri-Tech, and FinTech, Health Tech, and all of these revolutionized? The answer is yes, but that's 10 years out. The benefits that are seen world over are more to those industries around, adjacent industries around 5G, not to the telecom operators. Revenue streams remain flat. The investment required goes up significantly. In the case of India itself, we've done an assessment that we need to add significantly more to small cells. Over the next 5 years, you may end up having to take as much as 1 million more sites than what you have at present. Apart from upgrading, I'm talking about the industry, upgrading the existing towers, that's one part, but you have to have further that kind of a number, which will come up in terms of small cell requirements, just to ensure that there is good coverage, that there is fast networks, and that there is low latency, which is a must have if you want to have 5G at scale. In the trials that we got, the government was kind enough to give us spectrum. We did, of course, our trials of 5G in Pune and Gandhinagar. Other operators have also done their trials. We've been able to demonstrate how startups can come together, how enterprises can come together, how government can come together, telecom operators, to have very compelling cases around citizen safety, surveillance, around medical health being provided through telemedicine in a real compelling manner, education being given to schools that don't have good teachers by using distance education tools, how smart agri can be revolutionized. All of these things have been shown. But as I said, these are 10, 12, 15 years ahead in terms of being at scale. What do we do till then? Till then, we just need to keep on making more investments in order to make sure that that digital highway is created for the vehicles to run on it in the future. And therefore, I would say that while the long-term future from 5G looks good. The immediate experience of world over, and what General Kocher also talked about, India will have a little bit of a tougher journey in getting the right use cases is real. And therefore, pragmatic ways of dealing with costs, or what he called as inputs, become that much more critical. As long as that is done, and we are very hopeful because this government is very, very progressive. The regulators also putting their mind and heft behind ROW issues. They are actually doing, as we speak, trials in Bangalore Metro. They're doing trials in Delhi airport. They're doing in Kandla port, etc. All of these are being done in order to make sure how can small cells be shared as infrastructure. How can they get these trials done properly so that the requirement which I mentioned about 1 million plus small cells is facilitated. And these trials and the recommendations of TRAI and the efforts of DOT will be super, super critical for 5G to, at least from a cost point of view, becoming more affordable, and from a timeline point of view, being facilitated. To my mind, those two would be important. As operators, we have always been innovative and working with partnership models with great innovators in the Indian startup ecosystem. We shall continue doing that with enterprises that we serve very well already, and with the startup ecosystem with whom we have good partnerships. And Vodafone Idea has partnership at the base of our strategy. We will continue doing what is required to be done in order to create more and more use cases on a going forward basis. Thank you, Mansi.
Right. Thank you so much for the information, Mr. Balaji. Mr. Kocher, what's your take on this? And also, I would like you to touch upon, infrastructure aspect with in context to 5G. Rahul touched upon it a bit, like we need more fiberization and all. If you can elaborate on that aspect also.
Okay. Mansi, the problem is sitting with two articulate people who are so knowledgeable that they are the guys who drive the industry. There's really very little left for me to say. So
you are also an integral part.
Let me start with the basics. It's always easy to start with the basics. What is different between 4G and 5G? We must understand. This is the first time a technology will integrate sensors, machines, and human beings. Right. Now, in this, what will happen is the number of subscribers of these three categories is going to increase many fold, along with the challenges. Each entry point into the network will become an attack vector for the network. Okay, this will increase the technological challenge as well as financial challenge on telcos. Right. Now, what is the hallmark of 5G is adaptability and flexibility. It can give Rahul what he wants. It can give Balaji what he wants as a businessman. Whatever industry wants, telcos will give. Earlier, it was not so. Both had to sit together, make concessions, and see what can be done with 4G. 5G, that flexibility and adaptability has increased. But now, see, with this increase, technology permits it. The legal point does not permit it. Net neutrality will mitigate against what 5G can do. And unless we address that, all this network slicing, edge computing cannot be implemented. And therefore, the 5G networks will only be an extension of 4G with higher speeds, which nobody wants. Right? Affordability. Now, 5G requires a different handset. India is, like I said earlier, a very price-sensitive market. So unless there is benefit to a consumer, he is not going to subscribe to 5G. But the benefit and the answer lies in technology itself. When the operators go and roll out 5G, they're going to do it in various flavors. In the rural area, it'll be a non-standalone 5G for sure. In urban areas, there may be a smattering of standalone 5G and non-standalone 5G riding over 4G. And if you look at the entire ecosystem, subscribers who feel that their pockets are being challenged and they don't want to buy into 5G with extra costs, continue with 4G, but they can still interact with 5G. Whereas the industry which comes up here, whether rural or urban, goes into 5G services ab initio and yet get the benefit of the entire network as a composite network. So that is a change which is going to come in with 5G, along with the challenges. But is this sufficient? Look at the amount of data aggregation which will take place. Millions and millions of new subscribers will get added, whether they are sensors or human beings, doesn't matter. Now they will produce data. That data has to be taken backhaul. Okay. Now there is where the bottleneck will come. Aggregated data cannot go onto backhaul unless we have adequate fiber. And while the telcos, to their credit, are willing to expend money on laying out fiber, the environment is not yet suitable. I'll give you an example. The central government has advised 10,000 rupees per kilometer in the ROW rules. Compare it with what is being charged in a municipality of Pune, 1 crore rupees. So that is the amount of differential which we are trying to harness and get back into something which is sensible. Government is with us. Together we are trying to make a portal where technology comes to our help, to the government's help, and this thing happens. Right? So fiberization can happen only if the environment is enabled and regulated. Government is aware of it. We want it to happen tomorrow. They're working on it. They're working very fast. They've created a special directorate for that. So things are working, but we want it faster, right? And maybe there may be a requirement of changing some act, Telegraph Act, or getting some letters issued from the topmost office of the country so that they are implementable. Today, what letters get issued by DOT may not be implementable. It's up to the whims and fancies of the states whether they accept or they'll take it as advisories. They don't take it as a rule, right? But if it comes from the PMO's office, or if it becomes an act, then it is binding on the states. So that is the direction what we are trying to take. Now, while these networks start getting rolled out, and because this is a new technology, the capital infusion will be huge. The type of money that is required will be huge. To some extent, that has been the pain has been postponed by 4 to 6 years by these telecom reforms. It has not been removed. Remember that. What will help also is the AGR part, redefinition of AGR. So telcos, like I told you earlier, are not very keen to tax the burden of a common citizen, a pocket of a common citizen. So therefore, they'll get into different businesses now with AGR having been almost resolved, right? And that will accrue some amount of revenue to them, and hence their position may become a little better, provided it goes in the spirit in which it was meant, right? Ease of doing business, yes, it is required because in this 5G era which is emerging, the time is shortening and the area of influence is becoming large. And therefore, whatever decisions have to be taken, that OODA loop has to be within this space of shortened time and heightened space, geography, right? That is something which currently is recognized by the government. And they are working towards that with a lot of parlays with our members and working 24 hours a day on this. We are also working from CUI. We are working and achieving a lot of success with state governments, where when we go and tell them, listen, you're making a mistake. If you may get a lot of revenue from us as telcos for laying fiber, but remember, if you make it obsessive that you have to earn too much of revenue from this activity, then the network rollout in your state is going to be less, and the consequent effects will be industrialization will be less. Consequently, your state level GDP is going to get impacted. So be a little strategic and start looking at this. States like Maharashtra have looked at this. States like Karnataka have looked at this. They are falling in line, but there are states yet who say this is the only source of revenue that is there for our municipality. So what can I do? So this mindset has to change, right? And because the aggregation, the addendum question which you mentioned about infrastructure, we require backhaul, that I have indicated, and I have given you why we require backhaul. And the backhaul can be provided not only with fiber. We may require in areas where fiber can't go, we may require it to be supplemented with ENV bands, which is colloquially called as fiber in the air. It gives you near similar services, bandwidth, what fiber gives. So that is what government has to give us. They have to give us millimetric waves so that we can improve our backhaul. In areas which are totally inaccessible, maritime areas, foreign territories, we may require space to be the only element which can provide all this. All this has to be put in a cauldron, and this has to be then made to work for the benefit of the citizen, for the benefit of this country. And while this is being done, please remember that this is a golden opportunity for India to become not only a net consumer of telecom products, but also exporter of products. With the Chinese being banned, what was the advantage of China? They were giving it a low cost. Why were they giving it a low cost? Because of cost of production related to cheap labor in China made them bring the cost down, and the scale of production was huge. Now, with that becoming a vacuum, in the interim, telcos' woes are going to increase because they're going to import equipment. They're going to get equipment from Western countries, which are expensive. But with the government caveat that Make in India is essential, these countries will find it worth their while to set up manufacturing bases in India, take the advantage of Indian cheap labor, and maybe come at a cost which is at par with what China was providing, and then become net exporters. But it'll take time. It can't happen overnight. Today, policy is declared. Within a month, you can't expect results. It's going to take a lot of time. And till that time, the pockets of the telcos are going to be pinched. Remember that. The rollout of the network is going to get affected. So it has to be pragmatic. Right? For example, that is a particular equipment called PON equipment. Now, the supplies from global players have been stopped. Indian capacity has not been ramped up to that extent that we can provide this. And this equipment is essential to take fiber to the home. Right? That rollout is suffering. That is where we have to think through before we start implementing. And that is where we have to sit down. The government has to sit down with industry and think through strategically, rather than for the industry to react to what they do and ask them for changing the policies. Another area which is of concern to me is the network is as strong as its weakest link. While the core network is being subjected to a lot of regulations and checks and balances, the elements which attach themselves to the core network are not being subjected to the same amount of checks and balances. Rather, they've been given exemptions. The result is that there will be weak spots which will compromise the entire network. So treat the network and whatever is attached to the network as a composite whole, so that we get a grading of security which is composite and not fractured. So these are some of the concerns, Mansi. I thought I must air them.
Extremely important question. This is the time that we have seen that, and I'm delighted to inform that now is the first time last 2 to 3 years when the infrastructure also being emphasized by the central government itself, including DOT, and a lot of steps have been taken. Let me first divide into 2 to 3 parts the critical role that has been played. The infrastructure plays an extremely important role and is an important part of the ecosystem. Whether you take any generation of network, every new technology or every trend that comes, that again has to be accommodated and supported by the infrastructure. Coming back, digital infrastructure has played a pivotal role in the unhindered growth of the India sector. If you look at we have seen from March 2020 to this, first time that the work from home started, we found a little difficult. The data at that time was 7 to 8 GBs. Today, data is around 18 to 19. So therefore, there was a complete thrust on meeting the requirement of the work from home, on all e-services which are the government is there, to create an infrastructure. And during this period, I think that has been a period where we have added thousands of towers and thousands of BTS. In fact, I would say the pandemic on the flip side has brought many opportunities for us. This digitalization which has happened probably would have taken a pretty long time if hopefully this was not there. Now, let me just come back to a few things which are there. Now, we found we have, being a critical infrastructure, we have a very important line. Take a case of COVID-19. We ensured that people remain working from the work home. Then comes again, people go all the dose COVID-19 dose that they got it. Then we also faced during the period cyclone, 2-3 cyclones, which was, I think they infrastructure has stood the test of the time. Now there are issues and challenges which come. The states are still not on board. We have 36 states out of 32 have their rest of them, and out of only few states which are aligned, rest are still, many challenges are there and they're still not, like exorbitant fees is being charged. Then you have the portal not available. With the result, what happened? The number of sites have been pending to be in there. Then comes the EB connection, which is not being given to the infrastructure people on priority, which again becomes and then you come property tax. Property tax is another issue which some of the states are living, taking this, the tower is a building, so therefore one of the challenge. Then the ROW challenges are local bodies, the municipal corporation, the RWs are still not in line with the thinking of creating an infrastructure so that the government can provide broadband for all. Now, on the government side, I think a lot of initiatives have been. I think it's delightful to inform the audience here also that the government has taken huge initiative. First one that came out, ROW in November 2016, which laid down the ground, and this guideline came with the total involvement of all the stakeholders, including the states. Then comes the NDCB 2018, which laid the groundwork for all the under all three heads, whether it was security, whether it's the network, whether it's the coverage, whether it's the satellite, whether it was the infrastructure. So that is one document, I think very well, is a very comprehensive document. Again, it went through a thorough iteration to come out with the document. Then they recently, about 2 years back, the national broadband mission, which was launched in 2019, which became again, which laid down the number of targets that are required. That is, year by year, how many towers are to be added, year by year, how much fiber is to be added, year by year, how much the tower fiberation is added. That's one part. But that is done a great job of putting everything. Then comes the involvement of the local LSAs and all this. I think this is a creditable, which I think the LSAs are doing great job for the infrastructure as well as the telecom service provider to help and get the support from the state government for creation of the digital infrastructure. Then come the state broadband committee meeting. Then also their number of directions are being issued by time to time from the DOT to the chief secretaries and states to some way or the other to implement the ROW guidelines as well as to help proliferation of the broadband for all India. Next comes is the pilots and zonal. Now the zonal workshops have been held to ensure and make awareness with the DISCOMs, the state local bodies, the LSS, with respect to the creation of the digital infrastructure, number one. And also, how do we go about implementing the 5G? And for 5G, you need a different kind of infrastructure. That is the robust telecom infrastructure, which is required, is the densification of the network, because the 5G has provide different qualities by size, low latency, high bandwidth, etc. Therefore, the densification of the network is very important. For that, the DISCOMs are also being brought on the band, and we are also discussing with them. The number of guidelines which have come from the TRI and TEC guidelines and issued, DOT has also recently issued the draft guideline. I would say all around, I think the efforts are now on a high pitch to make sure that the 5G rollout takes place in time, and that is done. I think this is what I thought with small cells, street furniture, digital infrastructure is going to be a key role because of the denser network which is required and denser infrastructure will be required. That's the reason I think this is being taken on by. This is what I thought I'll share with you. We have had challenges, we had the opportunities, we have also created enough and continue to create enough infrastructure so that we are in time to provide the much needed 5G infrastructure in place. Thank you so much.
Very informative. But now looking, so many questions left to ask, but looking at the time, we'll have to wrap it up here. So if anyone has any closing remarks to share quickly, Rahul, Balaji.
Just thank you for conducting this wonderful, virtual conference and for inviting us into this panel.
Yeah,
Thank you, Mansi. Thank you. And my fellow panelists, you were very articulate and learned a lot of things from you, which I will come back and throw back at you that you said this.
Kochar Saab, we heard two more new things, ideas from you, including what you said at the basic level, how you talk about 5G providing flexibility and other things, which is a very different take. We normally take a more different view, technical view, versus your approach is very nice, very, very heartening.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you, Mansi. I think this is very important. And I think it's just going to be the precursor before we finally head towards a big transformation now. So very timely, and I'm sure we all gained from the conversations we had and understand better. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you to all the panelists. It was a delight to speak with you all as always. And I learned so much about the intricacies of the telecom sector. I'm sure our listeners will also learn quite a lot from this. Thank you so much for joining me today.